Hi everyone, my name is Natalie Fowler, and this is my review of Chapter 5, which is on access to higher education. And there's the citation for the text. So we will start off with a little background. So prior to World War II, higher education was considered to be for the elite. This means that a small percentage of the population was actually attending college. It was actually thought that you were wealthy or well off if you were attending college. Then, after World War II, higher education experienced high rates of growth, and this was because veterans returned, and there was what was called the GI Bill, which enabled large numbers of the vets to attend college. Then, not only the veterans were able to attend college, but also their children. So, this benefited the U.S. economy in a great way when all of these individuals began attending colleges, which led to the increase in the number of colleges that were available. Um, so there were actually comprehensive colleges that were composed of upgraded normal schools across all disciplines. Some states had all 4 year and 2 year colleges included in the same system, so it was a lot different than it is now. Community colleges were actually formed from older junior and vocational colleges, and the states actually took on a large share of the funding for these community colleges. And as we know, there are a great number of community colleges today in society. So there was an increase in the number of colleges available because of that massive growth that was experienced due to the World War II veterans and the baby boomer generation, which were their children. Next, we'll talk about how federal government gets involved in higher education. So the federal government pushed for states to develop grant programs in the 70s, and then they actually, for the state student incentive grant program, which was developed, the federal funding was matched for needs-based grant in state. So as we know, the federal government has been extremely involved, especially in the funding aspect of access to higher education for individuals, and they started then and it has carried on. They're still very much involved in that. So then we'll talk about the Higher Education Act, and then there was actually a reauthorization of the Higher Education Act, and the Higher Education Act really were the beginnings of statewide plans, and it funded states to develop coordinating commissions and statewide plans for higher education. So that really got the ball rolling with how states were planning to fund these colleges and provide access to students. And then the Higher Education Act actually became was reauthorized, and they brought in 1972 the Basic Educational Opportunity Grant, which is now known as the Pell Grant, which a large number of students rely on in order to have access to college. And this was introduced in 1972 as a major new program. And so the federal aid programs actually became the primary way for low-income students to gain access to college. Then there was the Middle Income Student Assistance Act of 1972, which was the reauthorization of the Higher Education Act, and this removed income caps for Pell Grants and guaranteed student loans. Why is this important? Because it promoted college choice and basic access for low-income students. Now we're going to talk about who actually goes to college, which is just going to talk about the racial composition and of who is actually attending college today. So community colleges and certificate programs have an overrepresentation of minority students. This just means that those technical and 2 year colleges have an overrepresentation of African American, low income, Hispanic students, so you would see more of those students at the community colleges and certificate program schools. The 4 year colleges, inequitable opportunities to enroll still. So that means that there is not equality yet as far as access to four-year colleges. However, there was a narrowing of the gap between African American students and Caucasian students. So what this means is that that gap between how many Caucasian students and how many African American students are attending college was narrowed. It was lessened. So there's not as big a gap there. But Hispanics are increasingly underrepresented. So there's lots of talk, and if you read the chapter on access, you will see that there are many discussions of why this gap could be there, how can we fix this gap, but as of yet, nothing has completely gotten rid of the gap and increased access or equality of access for everyone. So that's what these federal aids and public policies for higher education, that's what they are meant to do. Okay, so now we will talk about where are we now. So we've talked about a little bit of the history of how we got to where we are and who's actually going to college now. But we will talk about, we are in the fourth stage of the evolution in access to higher education. So stage one was from the colonial period through the Civil War. College access was extremely limited. But there were talks of generating new public colleges. So it was being thought about, but there was still very limited access. In stage two, which was between the Civil War and World War II, the nation's system of public and private nonprofit colleges were developed. So that system came about, but there was still very much limited access. Then in stage three, so that's World War II through the 1980s, there was a period of mass access, which was because of those veterans returning and their children going to school in the GI Bill. And so that was a booming time for access in higher education. And now stage four is our current period, what we're in now. And it is actually characterized, as the text states, by a movement towards access for all, or universal access. So everyone is encouraged to attend some type of post-secondary school and get some type of post-secondary education. It seems as though if you do not have that post-secondary education, these days it is extremely difficult to find a job, whereas in generations before, it may not have been as challenging. So that's how it affects us now. Everyone needs to, or is encouraged to get some type of higher education. So there's a strong push for college preparation in the text. It talks about how the Obama administration actually presses this issue, and it's been thought about for a long time. So the pre-college education must be acceptable, and what that means is the high school, middle school education, the quality needs to be where it is preparing students for what is going to happen in college. So that is often an issue that is talked about a lot. However, there is now more of a shift to focus on retention. Maybe that is a little more challenging than the college prep debate right now. So once we get students to the college and they receive their aid, how do we keep them there? So should there be a shift to focus on retention versus the pre-college preparation? So, and then because minorities are actually attending college, it is important for the future to look at the quality of the institution that the minorities are attending. This is something that I found extremely interesting in the text because up until that point, it had focused on just access, to whatever institution, higher education institution. But then they pointed out that there needs to be a look taken at the quality. So if minorities are not able to attend the more expensive, more prestigious colleges and universities, is that a problem? So that is something that I really enjoyed reading. So the Pell Grant funding has decreased. In the 1980s, there were arguments that were raised saying that colleges were being wasteful and that they were raising tuition prices just to increase the revenue from the Pell Grants. However, at the time, this argument was not based in research, but it did gain traction. And so, because all of the attention that this received in the late 80s, Pell funding did decline due to this. So, individuals do not receive as much Pell funding. College enrollment does continue to increase steadily. It's not like massive increases, but it is a steady increase. But there is a catch-22 with that, that tuition rates continue to increase as well. And why would this matter to us? If tuition rates rise faster than the aid that is given to students, access to more expensive colleges becomes more limited for the low and lower middle income students. And once again, why would that matter? Because it will impact our long-term labor markets if they are not able to attend because of tuition rates. And then, as mentioned before, Hispanics are still greatly underrepresented in access research. So the challenge is, how do we increase the access, or maybe the awareness of access for Hispanic students? So, some final thoughts. Research on access does continue to focus on academic preparation, which is that pre-college prep, focusing on high school, how we can get everyone on the same page and create links and connections between the two. But, as we mentioned, there needs to be maybe a shift towards focusing on retaining these students once we get them. Not to say that academic prep falls by the wayside, but maybe that we can also focus on retaining these students once we get them there, so that they can complete their goal or objective for attending higher education institutions. Public policies and their impact on student aid and tuition. It was found that there were questions as to maybe public policy does not impact student aid and tuition, but it definitely does. These public policies are very important in developing these student aid and tuition arguments. And then state finance policies and the impact on enrollment and college choice. So, state finance policies do impact enrollment and college choice because the more that the state funds, the more choice that is available. So if there's more aid provided by the state, then there is actually more choice in which college that students choose to attend. Okay, so my pressing questions are: do you feel that access to both 2-year and 4-year colleges is truly universal? We say that that's what we're moving towards. So do you feel that it is already there? If so, why? If not, why do you feel like it's not? And question number 2, does the thought of accruing debt deter students from enrolling? So if they don't qualify for that Pell Grant or any type of aid that they don't have to pay back and they're actually accruing debt, does this make them a little hesitant when going to enroll for college? And if so, how can a system be developed to determine an acceptable level of debt? Create that debt ceiling. We won't go above this for the students. And can this system be universal, or would it need to be individualized based on the student needs? And is college prep still an issue? So do you feel like college prep is still an issue, or is it something that we can move on from now? Have we solved the problem? And if so, what can be done to narrow the education gap between high school and college? That's a question that has been debated a very long time. But anyway, I look forward to reading your responses. Thank you for your time.